I found her surrounded by heaps of photographs with a grimace of tragic helplessness on her face. "Do you want me to help you?" I asked. "No," she said. "They are my albums." Such things, albums, family albums, private albums, they follow the idea of a beauty of common people. It is non-institutional beauty. And that's why somehow, maybe that's why I've chosen to talk about photography and about family albums, not about photography in general, not about photography as art. Private photographs, not photographs which are concerned as art, or not documentary photographs, not war photographs, not photographs of towns, landscapes, but of a people, common people. And that's why it is very moving. I mean, how common people, how they organize their private museums where they record their lives or their faces of their family. This is it. This is completely different. It's a home museum. It's underground museum. It is non-institutional museum. It is a museum where we can see somebody unknown, I mean anonymous, not a Rembrandt, but anonymous person. And this is additional, I mean, moving, very touchy thing about family albums and about photographs, private photographs as well. Because as you know, it is signing up for eternity, basically. I mean, there is a certain magic about the old photographs, and they seem to us eternal, not new photographs. The way people pose, they pose like in front of the painters of portraits, and all those pictures are very precisely organized. They are not snapshots of a moment. They are the way people stand, the way people pose, the way people are dressed, the way people look at the camera. It is a look prepared for eternity, for being shown one day to the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. This is their terrain. I mean, they can't write symphony, they can't paint beautiful pictures, they can't write beautiful novels or beautiful autobiographies. So what they do, common people, it is to leave some trace, to leave some document, to leave to somebody. Who knows? I mean, okay, if you have grandchildren, to your children, grandchildren, and so on. But maybe even not that. Maybe even only a record, some chronology, some document about yourself. This is it. And this is the only technique they learned and they know. This is the way how they can express themselves. That's why it is, for me, especially albums are so moving. I mean, because really moving, because and you could feel some pain because of course it's a procedure of beautifying your everyday life and your own personal history. But that's why it is so moving, and that's why it is so painful. Basically, it's a death mask, which poor people could afford.
Damit muss er reden. Wir sind ja so ein doofen Rätsel. No, no. Ja. Danke. Ich bin gerade im Zimmer.
Wil je het niet hebben over de schoonheid en troost van je leven in Joegoslavië, voordat het land explodeerde? Wil je het niet hebben over wat je troostte toen je besloot in ballingschap te gaan? Over een gezicht misschien, een onbetekenende herinnering. Ja, wil je het niet hebben over het sprookjesachtige van de literatuur? We hebben gepraat over allerlei mogelijkheden, maar ze bleef bij die ene, het fotoalbum. Waarom we plotseling in Berlijn waren, op een vlooienmarkt, tussen de prachtigste rotzooi. Ik bedoel, hadden we haar verhaal al niet opgenomen, in Nederland, in een studio. Het verhaal over het fotoalbum van haar moeder, die nog steeds in Zagreb woont. Was dat niet voldoende? Blijkbaar niet, want hier stonden we. Hier zocht Dubravka Ugresic naar fotoalbums die haar misschien zouden doen denken aan het album van haar moeder. Ze zocht een half uur en vond er 2. Zo makkelijk gaat dat. 2 albums uit ontelbaar veel miljoenen, waarover we in een naburig hotel nog wat zouden praten, aangeschaft voor de prijs van nog geen gulden per stuk.
Dankeschön, danke.
November, du bist so feucht und kalt mit deinen Starallüren. Die Sonne ärgert sich, aber es gibt Menschen noch, die mit lächelnden Mienen gehen durch den Grunewald. Riecht die Kälte in dir rein, muss wohl in Berlin November sein. Autorin in Berlin, Flohmarktdichterin aus Berlin. Von 16 bis 18 Uhr bin ich im Bocki, Oranienstraße, Ecke Adewert, im Ölbiersäcke Stringelner zum Morgenstern. I'm singing in the morning my crazy song. Schließe die Augen und träume und denke meine eigene Welt. Vergesse den ganzen Trouble und den Stress. Ist alles ganz schön verdreht und spiele meinen eigenen crazy song. La 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 la. I'm singing in the morning my crazy song. Schließe die Augen und Träume und denke meine eigene Welten. Autorinnen Eileen, Flohmarktdichterin und Berlin. Denn ein kleiner Flohmarkt in Berlin, der plötzlich...
What are Slavica and Branko doing here? She says, taking the album from my hands and scrutinizing the photograph of a young smiling couple. Who are Slavica and Branko? You don't know them, you were only little. She shrugs. If I only knew why I had put them in the album. She murmurs to herself, emphasizing them and looking carefully at the photograph as though it was some rare botanical specimen. Suddenly, with a swift movement of a hand removing a sticking plaster, she detaches the cellophane cover, takes out the photograph and tears it into small pieces. The paper sound of the execution rips the air. There, she says. They've been dead for ages anyway. She adds in a conciliatory commemorative tone, handing me back the album. The beginning of this story is hidden in a lady's pigskin bag which she had brought with her along with a suitcase of a modest contents in that far-off year of 1946. As soon as the first post-war opportunity permitted her to buy a new lady's bag, the old one settled in a corner of the wardrobe and from that moment on served as a storehouse for memories. In my impoverished post-war childhood, deprived of things, Mother's bag was a substitute for a non-existent cellar or attic, a doll's house, a toy chest. I used to take out its modest contents, enthralled, feeling like a participant initiated into some mystery. I couldn't know that is exactly what I was, a participant in the simple mystery of life. To start with, the bag concealed photographs of my mother mainly. Mother's photographs were exciting. In some she wore unusual hats, in others sailor suits and school caps, in others swimsuits, mother in a boat, an unknown sea glistening behind her, a sight I had yet to see. There were also photographs of an older married couple who must have been my grandmother and grandfather, a young woman who must have been my aunt, and her little girl, my cousin. The pictures didn't mean much to me, as I didn't know any of those people. Apart from Mother's photographs, tied with a pretty ribbon, there were some of Father, then of me, as a newborn baby, and some of us together, Mother, Father, and me in idyllic scenes of playing in the snow. With the time, the bag grew old, worn, tattered around the edges. It was no longer possible to close it. The photographs fell out, trickling out of the bag, straggling round the wardrobe. We piled them up, tied them with a string, and put them back in the bag in an effort to create order. Shoe boxes also appeared beside the bag. We threw the pictures into those boxes or shoved them into books and drawers. Mother's bag reminded the central storehouse of memories. My mother often grumbled that we must tidy up, that she would throw all the photographs out one day. But despite her grumbling, nothing changed. Not the corner of the wardrobe, nor the bag in the corner, nor its function. In 1973 my father died. I loved him, but I took his death rather calmly and reproached myself for being so cold. A month after his death, a photograph of him slid out of somewhere and appeared silently by my feet. A glance at that little picture, at that little silent fact, tugged at a thread in me, and I was shaken by a sudden, powerful sob, which took my breath away. I shut myself in my room and wept. I thought I would never stop. When I finally calmed down, my mother came into my room and pronounced a sentence which true sense of which I would understand only much later. "We ought to buy some albums," she said. When I left my country, if I can say that, my country.
Left you.
Or my country left me, so whatever. And there was a very moving moment when my mother, she bought a very cheap and very small photo album, and of that very small, which you could put in the purse, yeah. And then she said, you should take that with you because somebody will ask you, so where is your family? And then you wouldn't have anything to show. And when I look at her choice of photographs, she put several photographs of her, of our family, of my father, of my brother, of me when I was young, and so on. But what I remember, that I had a terrible feeling of pain. It was so painful to take those photographs with me. I didn't do that. I let them.
Why?
I don't know why. Really, I don't know why. But first time she did it, I let them. I didn't want to have them with me. So it was simply pain. It was painful spot, something like, you know. It was strange feeling first why I did feel pain, and second why I didn't want to take them with me. Second reason, or I would say a point where I somehow became interested in photography was when I met a refugee in Berlin who said, you know, refugees are divided in two categories. He meant, of course, Yugoslav refugees. Yeah? He said they're divided in two categories, those with photographs and those without. Then, when I met acquaintances, refugees all over, I was surprised how people didn't feel sorry for their destroyed houses or homes or material lost or even the loss of the country. I heard that hundreds of times, how they were sorry that they didn't have time to take their photographs. There is even a story, I don't know whether it is truth or not, that General Mladic, Serbian leader, general, who grenaded Sarajevo. So the story goes that he, from those hills, which surrounds Sarajevo, saw the house of his friend. And then he found him. And he said, "You have 5 minutes to pick your albums and to run away, because I'm going to grenade your house." So, in that sadistic statement of General Mladic, there is one thing. He said, "You have 5 minutes to pick your albums and to run away." So what he meant is you have 5 minutes to pick your memories, prove that you existed, and then I will grenade you, I will destroy you, because I'm anyway destroying lives, town, libraries, I'm destroying memory. Probably the basic thing why photographs are so important to people, like I mentioned, refugees who lost everything and who are now living all over, is that really photography is the proof that we existed. And this is the point, which was important for me. There I suddenly realized that we're surrounded with images, photographs, photo albums, they're all over. Somebody's taking photographs of us, we are taking of somebody, so we don't pay attention. And then there is a moment where suddenly that becomes a very, very important thing. When I finally calmed down, my mother came into my room and pronounced a sentence which true sense of which I would understand only much later. "We ought to buy some albums," she said. We did. The brown pigskin bag was thrown out of the wardrobe. A haphazard, disorderly heap of life burst into the light of day. I looked at the faces, smiles, bodies, those yellowish-brown, black and white scenes, those smudges of light on rectangular bits of paper, and felt uneasy, as though I'd caught sight of something embarrassing. One day, I found her surrounded by heaps of photographs with a grimace of tragic helplessness on her face. "Do you want me to help you?" I asked. "No," she said, "they're my albums." The pain, of course, the pain is my mother's albums. Because she tried as any of those persons, I don't know. She tried to make some beauty, to make a life, to construct life story, to construct her family life, to leave something to her children, some record of herself. And this is very painful. This is very moving.
It's painful, why? Because if you have a look at the photographs of the way she is scheduled in them, what kind of a life wants you to inherit?
A record which is much more beautiful than a real life, of course. This is the process of beautifying everyday life. There is a very nice Urlaub, Zomer, 58. So, now you have house. Ladies, two ladies rented the house. You have flowers in front of the house. You have the proof that that flower really existed. It is not only photograph. Again, very nice they're posing. And this is that archaic principle as well. I mean, everything should be nice for such an album. No ugly photographs. No irony. Yeah. No making fool of yourself.
This has to be Arcadia.
Yes. See? From 1958, even keeps the color. This is the old map of the place. Small poems. They've written small poems.
Am Himmel strahlte hell die Sonne, die Herzen waren voll Freude und Wonne, als man an den Urlaub dachte und uns das Schiff nach Fiete brachte. Yes, this is Arcadia. This is life how it's meant.
Yeah, but see, sunset, boats, beautiful. Everything is beautiful. Look at this. We have animals. Yeah. Again, flowers, Arcadia. What we have here, beach.
Schon morgens früh, da stürmten sie mit frohen Sinn den Kaffee trinken.
Yeah. Now we have children. They started to appear. Probably family came to visit those two ladies. These are probably grandchildren.
Omis Häuschen, oh wie schön, ist mit Ute hier zu sehen. Unsere Lütte, wirklich süß, lebt hier wie im Paradies. Here we are.
Here we are, yeah. This, again, grandchildren. Now we have visiting something, a farm or what. This is very nice ending. Yeah, it's an excursion probably. Now we have family scenes. And this is the end. I leafed through the albums. They reminded me of the bag. The pictures were in order, admittedly, but there was no way of guessing at any kind of principle of organization of the material. Even the photographs of my mother herself, which had always been kept separate, tied with a jealous ribbon, were now mixed up with all the others. Either there were too few albums, or there were too many pictures. She couldn't decide, or didn't know how. She had given up the battle with genre at the outset. One day she rearranged the albums, seeking to establish a chronology of events, but for some unknown reason the principle broke down there as well. Within that flimsy chronology she tried to establish some kind of hierarchy, but if she decided to erase the unimportant people from her life, cases of an equally unimportant people would still be there. The principles of a chronology of events and their significance in her life was destroyed, it seems, by her inner sense of things. So, for example, she devoted an exceptional amount of space to photographs of the weddings of some distant nephews, although she was barely in touch with them. Evidently, she simply liked the wedding pictures. Mother's albums, the way she set out the facts of her life, revived before my eyes an everyday life I had forgotten. This everyday life was arranged by the mere fact of being posed. Then it was resorted through the selection of photographs, but perhaps just because of an amateur artistic impulse that the facts of life should be nicely arranged, it sprang up in the gaps, in the mistakes, in the method itself, touchingly authentic and alive. One of the pictures would reveal my little shoes with the cut-off toes and disclose the world of post-war shortages in which toes grew more quickly than the ability to purchase new shoes. A time of workers' union outings, speeches and flags, pioneers, miniature socialist spectacles reduced to the measure of the provincial town in which we lived, the celebration of 1st of May, children's fancy dress processions, which we called the Corso of Flowers. The picture shows me as a poppy, thrilling pyramids of friendship, relay races, cross-country runs, family holidays. An unwritten history of everyday life emerged, which, judging by these pictures, so innocent and universal, could have taken place anywhere, but nevertheless did take place here. Once I noticed a little triptych in one of the albums, 3 photographs of her arranged next to each other. On the first, she could have been about 20, on the second 30, and on the third about 40. The most recent picture of her was off in the corner, outside the triptych. I've aged terribly, haven't I? No, I said, examining the photographs carefully. Covering a distance of some 10 years with each picture, her face certainly had changed. Its roundness turned into an oval, her big brown eyes grew smaller and became somehow slanted. Her full lips became flatter and lost their appealing pout. 2 lines by her mouth began in her 30s to turn downwards, and in her 40s there were already barely perceptible little pouches on either side of her face. By the most recent photograph, her mouth was visibly sagging sadly. No, I said again, closing the album. When I picked up the same album again, the triptych had been removed, the pictures rearranged, and the newest, the one with the sagging mouth, had disappeared forever.
Your mother made up a story.
Yeah.
The photographs of her life.
Of course, and now they are very valuable to me.
For what reason? Because she made it up.
Because she was my mother. She is my mother. I mean, and it is simply nice to look at those pictures.
Why?
Because they're mine.
But
Because
they're
this
not
is,
the truth.
it is a truth. I don't know anything about that truth. Because I don't remember her, and I couldn't, when she was a, let's say, young woman. I didn't appear yet at that time. And I see her beautiful photographs, how she was beautiful.
Highlights of her life.
I see what I have, what she prepared for me. Probably some, censorship worked as well.
What is she trying to tell you by showing you those photographs?
The same what she tried to tell herself. The same what will probably I try to tell myself. Some consoling story about myself. Don't forget, we are not putting ugly pictures into albums. And usually we are not keeping, ugly, not pretty pictures around us.
You remember
This is
last
my
time
album.
you throw away a picture?
I don't know. Probably I did that job as well.
Looking at yourself?
Yeah, of course.
What happened?
Probably I didn't like myself, and I simply did the same job of censorship, which means the same job of construction of personal history. Yeah? Executing the ugly spots, ugly faces, people you don't, you are doing that fiercely. People you don't like. This romantic scene, of a, let's say, a love story which crashes, and he or she tears all his or her photographs because she or he doesn't want to have her or him in her life dossier anymore. So it's a symbolic act, and of love, and the photograph of surrogate of your beloved person, of that. There are so many stories connected with the photographs as our personal history. With the time, Mother did succeed in putting her albums in order. The one I liked the best contained the pictures she had brought with her in that far-off year of 1946. Liberated from its ribbon, the bunch of yellowish-brown photographs now spread through the album in all their patinaed beauty. Young grandmother and grandfather with the friends with striking features, family friends, Armenians, said Mother, gathered round a gramophone with a speaker like a giant lotus. There were Mother's appealing girlhood pictures on a beach, in a boat, on a walk with girlfriends, in the shadow of trees, on an outing. Young girls in silk dresses, among them Ellie, my mother. Look, she says, pointing at a young man with a face like a greyhound. He was my first love. I recognized the face. She used often to point at that picture, always saying the same words. He was my first love. Who knows whether he is still alive, she says, stroking the cellophane cover with her fingertips as though it were a crystal ball. When she came out of the hospital in July 1989, tormented by doubts about her survival, Mother asked me to take her photograph. Through the little eye of the Canon automatic, I saw her hopelessly struggling to give her frightened face an expression which she would leave us, her children, as her last. I watched that inner effort to raise her sad, drooping face and drag a smile onto it, while, no matter how she tried, the effort resulted in one single, unambiguous expression which she could not see or know, a naked spasm of fear. Suppressing a surge of emotion hidden behind the camera, I struggled between the wish to do what she asked and the terror that, if I did, the picture really would be her last. "That's it," I said, pressing the shutter. Chance had the last word. There was something wrong with the camera, and Mother recovered. Then I still had that American Canon camera, it worked. Why wouldn't I take her photograph? And I immediately understood what was her thought. She wanted to leave us her last image. And it was terribly painful for me to do that. And really, what happened, something was really wrong with the camera, and I couldn't take that picture. And my mother really recovered. And I had exactly that fear, that it is much better not to take her photograph. So, but that was a moment of probably, after the initial chaos, the initial selection, ordering and organization, after touching up, after discarding an ugly pictures, the photographs in my mother's albums seemed for some time now to have settled into their permanent disposition. Nevertheless, I noticed that the currents of a new life did manage quietly to creep into the strict albums. Someone's telephone number, a newspaper cutting about where to buy special door locks and alarms, or an article about the noxious effects of tomatoes, someone's holiday postcard. As though the emptied spaces left by the discarded photographs attracted replacements through an invisible magnetism. But then she would tidy them, throw out the rubbish which, escaping her control, had crept into her albums and disturbed the construction of her personal history. Sometimes I would come across her leafing through her albums. Then she would close the one she was holding, take off her glasses, put them down and say, "Sometimes I feel as though I never lived." Life is nothing other than a photograph album. Only what is in the album exists. What is not in the album never happened, she would say. It deals equally with mortality, because it is one moment which is frozen, which is fixed, which is stolen, which is caught from you, but as well with immortality as well, because it is meant to be immortal. And then it is the most fragile proof of your existence you can imagine, because you could tear it, or you can burn it. I mean, what is photograph? I mean, nothing. So it's a kind of, I would say, miraculous small thing, which plays with many layers and many meanings, and that's why it is not simple to talk about that. However, it seems that it is simple. In 1991, after the definitive collapse of the idea which was for my father the future he had been fighting for, after the disintegration of the country which had been kept together by the same idea, Mother gathered my father's old medals for brotherhood and unity, for devoted work in the building of socialism, into a heap, put them into a plastic bag as though they were human remains, saying sadly, "I don't know what to do with them. Why don't you leave them where they were? What if someone finds them?" I said nothing. "You take them," she pleaded. Let us remember only the top 10 photographs which were all over the world. Yeah? It was a photograph of concentration camp in Manjača, which was on all the covers everywhere, and destruction of a bridge in Mostar. This is very interesting to analyze why certain images were the most popular, because of their symbolical message. It could stay as a metaphor for the war, or destruction of an old bridge, and so on and so on, and probably all kind of manipulations, all kind. And photography served in those purposes.
Yeah, but you don't know whether you remember them in black and white or color, for instance.
This is a very interesting question. The moments of horror are in black and white.
For you?
I don't know, but now when you asked me, suddenly I realized that I don't remember colors. And the first thought was that they were black and white. But it is impossible, because everything was in color.
Yeah.
See?
So? It could have something that I'm pushing the recent experience to some past. That's why I decided that it should be in black and white. It was before the Second World War.
Yes, it was a long time ago.
I was not present.
Yes. See? How it works. The same year, when the names of the streets changed, when the language and the country, the flags, the symbols all changed, when the wrong side became right and the right side was suddenly wrong, when some people were afraid of their own names, when people were butchering each other, when some were butchering others, when armies with different insignia sprang up on all sides, when the strongest set out to obliterate everything from the face of their own country, when terrible heat waves laid the land bare, when a lie became the law, when the law a lie, when people pronounced nothing but monosyllabic words, blood, war, gun, fear, when the little Balkan countries shook Europe, maintaining rightly that they were its legitimate children, when ants crawled out from somewhere to devour and tear the skin from the last descendant of the cursed tribes, when old myths fell apart and new ones were feverishly created, when the country she had accepted as hers fell apart, and she had long since lost and forgotten her first one, when she was seared by heat in her flat as it radiated from the baking concrete and the concrete sky, when the panic-stricken light of the television flickered day and night, when she was racked by the icy fever of fear, my mother, despite everything, kept tenaciously to her dogged ritual visits to my father's grave. I believe that it was then that she looked for the first time at the moist gravestone and suddenly noticed the 5-pointed star, although it had always been there, at her request. And perhaps for the first time she had the thought, feeble and exhausted as she was, that it might be possible to paint out the 5-pointed star carved into the stone, and then she thrust the thought aside in shame and kept the photograph of my father in his partisan uniform in the album as her own. It was as though it was then suddenly confronted with the little star above my father's name that she really accepted her own biography as well. When she got home, she sat down in her baking flat as in a train. She sat there with no defender or flag, with no homeland, virtually nameless, with no passport or identity card of her own. From time to time she would get up and look out of the window, expecting to see scenes of the war-destroyed country, for she had already observed such scenes. She sat like that, in her flat, as in a train, not traveling anywhere, because she had nowhere to go, holding on her lap her only possessions, her albums, the humble dossier of her life. Both the album and autobiography are by their very nature amateur activities, doomed from the outset to failure and second-rateness. That is, the very act of arranging pictures in an album is dictated by our unconscious desire to show life in all its variety, and as a consequence, life is reduced to a series of dead fragments. There is only one thing that both genres can count on, but they never do count on anything, because calculation is not in their nature, and that is the blind chance that they will hit upon the point of pain. When that happens, and it rarely does, then the ordinary amateur creation emerges victorious on another non-aesthetic level, turning even the most splendid artistic work to dust. In literature, such a work is an object of envy only for real writers. Namely, such a work has achieved with divine ease what they, for all their efforts, will never achieve. both the album and autobiography respect the subject they are concerned with. The subject is so personal, how could it not be respected? Compiling an album and autobiography are activities guided by the hand of the invisible angel of nostalgia. With its heavy, mournful wing, the angel of nostalgia brushes aside the demons of irony. That is why there are hardly any comic albums, ugly photographs, humorous autobiographies. It is in these most sincere and most personal of all genres, the album and autobiography, that the seizures of censorship are most assiduous. It is beautifying us, everyday life, our family, our children, everything which surrounds us. We want that to be recorded, but in a beautiful way. Yeah, and then looking at that, we feel kind of consolation, or full consolation. Yes, you can tell somebody, these are my grandchildren, that was me when I was young, this is, I don't know, my friends, my husband, I don't know what, or this is the moment when I visited Schwarzwald and so on, and we had nice, happy vacation and so on. Yeah, it's very ambiguous.
It's a beautiful lie.
Maybe. But then it works as a truth.
Fingerdeck ist privat. Das ist kein Münzalbum, das ist das Ding von der Flohmarktdichterin. Das ist mein Denken, mein Bauch da drin. Aber du kannst aufschreiben oder ein Gedicht sagen, wenn du willst. Aber nicht meine. Aber das macht ja nichts. Okay, bye bye.
Some time ago, I myself bought an album, an elegant one, with a nice brown pigskin cover, which I had been trying to find for a long time. A little while ago, I picked it up. Leafing through the pages, I stopped at a photograph of myself. I examined it carefully and noticed two little lines around my mouth. They pointed downwards, making on either side of my mouth a small, barely noticeable pouch. With a swift movement, as though removing a sticking plaster, I detached the cellophane cover. The paper sound of the execution ripped the air, took out the photograph, tore it into small pieces, and abandoned it to the eternal darkness of oblivion. In the bottom, deepest drawer of my desk, there is a jumble of photographs. When I opened the drawer, faces, smiles, bodies, those smudges of light on rectangle of paper pour out. I have kept one bundle of pictures in an envelope, stuck it down, tied it with a ribbon, and pushed right to the bottom. From time to time, looking through my things, I come across it. I touch it. I feel the pain with the tips of my fingers, and I know that it is not yet time to open it. But one day, when I think that the pain has gone, I shall open it, look at the pictures and arrange them in the album. I shall select them carefully, arrange them meticulously, taking care that there should be no mistake.